Good morning, everybody. Welcome again. So today we continue, for the adults also, our series on the book of Revelation. And today we're going to be looking at Revelation 17. Now, the book of Revelation, in its essence, is a judgment on the Christian church. It's a judgment that has happened on the Christian church and a judgment that happens for each one of our lives. So the book is relevant, and every story is relevant to each one of our lives. Now, when we read through anything, we like to pick and choose a little bit. It's part of our fallen nature. We are drawn to the things that are joyful and happy, and we shy away from the things that are disturbing. The things that are joyful and happy, we say, yes, this is part of my life. And we have a tendency to look at the hurtful things or the disturbing things and say, no, those aren't part of my life. But the reality is, the Lord's Word is describing each one of our lives. The Lord's Word is describing what is. And our walk with the Lord is to discover inwardly in ourselves how that is true. The Lord describes what is, and our journey is to see that it is true within our lives. And so when we're reading something and it does disturb us, we need to start looking inwards in ourselves to see where that is within. No one is immune, no one is above anything that is written in the Lord's Word. And that will be the case with today's story as well, which we'll get to a little bit later. So I want to first talk about the problems that we experience in life. We all experience problems in many, many different ways. Here are just a couple of examples. We tend to believe that with problems in the world, if everyone just believed what I believed or saw things my way, there would be no problem. That would just make things disappear, right? If people thought like me, or if people felt like me, then we wouldn't have any problems. We'd all see the same thing, and life can just move forward freely. In our family life, right? Our family life would be so much quieter if the children would just listen to what I said. Right? If things just go the way I want them, then there would be no problems. In our marriage, we could have the same thing. Right? A marriage would be so much more peaceful and full of joy and happiness if my spouse would just do the duties that they should be doing as a spouse, whether husband or wife. Just do your duties properly, and our marriage would be more happy, more peaceful. It applies in our workplace too. We have that tendency to want things to go our way, right? Our ideas are the best. I work the hardest. If you just do it my way, it will work out. We have this tendency within everything that we do to think we know better, to think we know more, to think that we are right. We have a tendency to think that what I am feeling is what others are feeling, or that I know what another person is feeling. We have a tendency to think that the way that I react to something is the way others should react to it. And if you react more, then you're being a bit dramatic, and if you react less, well, what's wrong with you? You should be reacting more. The same with how we affected by situations, about news. Right? Some news might affect us very deeply, and others around us it doesn't affect. And we might say, well, why? Don't you have a heart? Right? We're using ourselves to measure other people, whether it's things to do with the heart or whether it's things to do with the mind. We take ourselves as the measure and want things to be like me, my way. So we need a bit of a reality check. The reality is the only person that you know and sort of know, right? Because our journey through life is actually trying to get to know ourselves better. So we don't actually know ourselves, but yet we think that we can determine or know what another person is thinking or another person is feeling. Reality check, the only person we really know is ourselves. A reality check is what works for you is not the answer for somebody else. Right? Each of us is unique. Each of us is an individual. What works for me is not going to work for you. The way I feel loved and fulfilled is not going to be the way that you feel loved and fulfilled. And I cannot assume that by me giving the way I want to give is going to actually fulfill you. We need to face the reality that we know very little about another person. And in fact, we don't know enough about ourselves either. Now we have that need to control. We have that need to put ourselves first. We have the need for our thoughts and our feelings to be above others, and we forget these realities. We forget these realities. And so, with our blinders on to the realities that we don't know enough about another person, we start to push ourselves onto others. Right? Me first. Me first. And so we push our view onto others. I want you to see things my way. I want you to feel things my way. What we're doing is we're pushing down another person's thoughts and feelings, and we're lifting up our own. We're wanting to control them, right? We're wanting to dominate over them. Pushing down and lifting up. And we may not even realize that that's what's happening. But as soon as we push ourselves and our opinion onto another person, we are saying, I don't value you, but I value myself a whole lot more. And so what we find ourselves doing is inserting ourselves as an authority into another person's life. This is the way you need to think. This is the way that you need to feel. And so people feel devalued. People feel attacked. We assume that we have the power to even do that. That somehow because I know and somehow because I know how you're feeling, I can tell you exactly what you need to do. That somehow I have that power to know. And so this is the dominance and the control and the power that is prevalent in all of our life. It's sort of in the embers within everything that we do, burning away, bringing forward this control and power and wanting things my way. And essentially what we're doing is we're putting ourselves as God in another person's life. We're saying, I know you. I know what you need to do. I know the path that you need to walk. I know what you need to think. But the reality is we don't. The only person who does know is the Lord. And so when we assume things about other people, we are putting ourselves in place of God. We are breaking the first commandment. The first commandment. When we seek to dominate, control, push others down, put our own view forward over another person's, we are breaking the first commandment. And then we wonder why people get upset with us. We wonder why people get upset with us when we push our ideas, and this is how you need to feel, this is how you need to think. Because God gives freedom. And what do? We are trying to take that away from people with our control and with our power and with putting ourselves above them. And so we like to think that we have the power. We like to think that we know. We like to think that we have some sort of control over things. But only the Lord knows. Only the Lord knows. So let's take an example of a parent and a teenager. And a teenager is at that age where they are now getting into dating. Right? As a parent of a teenager, I know that there's a desire in me to protect. Right? I want to protect them from mistakes. I want to protect them from harm. But the funny thing about teenagehood is it's that time in life where we're actually wanting them to take on more control of their own lives. And so it's very difficult for us as parents to find that balance of what is protecting and what is now controlling. What am I taking away from my child? What is that's stopping them from growing and developing in an orderly way? And so we, with control and power, we want to now restrict our teen. We want to restrict their movements. We want to restrict the people they interact with, the times that they go out, the days that they go out. Right? We put in place more restrictions. Why? Because of our fears, because of our needs, rather than thinking, well, what is best for them? And trying to find that balance between parents and teen is very difficult. What is protective and what is controlling? In our work environment, maybe we manage somebody or we are part of a team, and it's very easy to have a need to prove ourselves, to feel like we're part of this team or that we're respected. And in that need, we have a desire to push others down in order to lift ourselves up. We criticize another person's idea. We judge it as not as good as mine, and instead we promote ours as better, as more important, as the right way. And so we assert ourselves into the team, or as a manager onto a person, exerting control, exerting power over them. The same can happen in a marriage. In a marriage of husband and wife, we have relationship roles. And we can use those relationship roles in order to exert power and control over our spouse. We can say, well, this is the husband's duty. This is the wife's duty. And then expect someone to fit into that box and control that box and define that box so that we get out of that person what we desire. Right? Control and manipulation over somebody. It can also be more subtle. It can be more subtle, like, which end of the toothpaste do you squeeze? Who is right in which end to squeeze? Which way does the toilet paper go on the toilet holder? Right? Is it against the wall or over? Right? These are areas where we feel like we need to exert control over another person. The right way to pack the dishwasher. Right? We have our own view, someone has theirs, and we want to exert our power over them, dominate them, and say, no, this is the way that it's going to be done. My way. We have expectations in marriage also, that what I feel as loving and intimate is what you feel as loving and intimate. And so we expect another to be loving and intimate the way we want to, without really thinking about them. We want it our way, the same as me. And so this control, this power, this putting boxes around things, keeping people in check and getting out of them what we want, that pervades all of our life. Control and power is very seductive. It's a part of every part of our life. But now add into that picture the teachings that come from faith, the teachings that come from a religion, the teachings that come from church. Dominion and power and setting up boxes. Add to that the idea of teachings that the church has. Now we start to get to very dangerous ground, very disturbing ground, because part of control and being over somebody is using whatever is available to exert that power and control. And so we can draw on the things of the church, the holy things of the church, to exert power and control over other people in our lives. And that's disturbing. That's disturbing to us. It should be disturbing to us. Parents, for example, using the ideals of marriage, using the things of the church to cast a very narrow path for your child to walk. And if they misstep off the path in some way, there is great disappointment. There is a feeling of failure. There is a feeling of being unclean because they no longer fit on that path. Using the things of the church to create that path, and then not being forgiving or understanding when things don't always work out the way we had said they should. The impact that has on our children is significant, and the shame and the guilt that they can carry for the rest of their lives. The same is true in marriage, using the heavenly ideals of marriage that the angels experience and expect us to be able to live by them in an earthly world and not make mistakes and not step out of the boundaries or not quite fit into the box, because we never start off perfect. We're taking a perfect ideal and we're trying to bring it into an imperfect world. And so we have these expectations that are unrealistic, or where a husband is expected to fit into this kind of box and a wife into that kind of box, and the husband doesn't quite fit into that. Or they find that they're perhaps a more loving kind of person than an intellectual person, or a wife finds herself as being a more intellectual person than a loving person, and they don't fit into the prescribed roles. Then there is pain, then there is hurt. People forcing one another into boxes when we're living in an imperfect world. Why? So that we can get out of them what we want, using the truths of the Lord's Word to help us strengthen that box that they must live in. And so this is where the story of today comes in. It's a disturbing story. It's a disturbing image in Revelation 17, and you can read the whole chapter for yourself. I'm only going to read the first 2 verses of it, but it's describing you and me. Right? Remember, the Lord is describing what is, and it's our work, it's our journey to see the truth of that in our own lives. So here we're going to read from Revelation 17, verse 1 and 2. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on the many waters, with whom the kings of the earth commit fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." This is not a pretty image. It's a disturbing image. It should disturb us. It's describing, in essence, adultery, but not a physical adultery. Right? The Lord describes heavenly, spiritual principles. So what is being described here is a spiritual adultery, far worse than a physical or earthly adultery. This is the adultery that the Lord is trying to draw our attention to, right? That we all, in some way or in many ways, adulterate His Word, use His Word in ways that it wasn't intended. I want to read to you from the teachings for the new church, from the book Apocalypse Revealed, number 719. It talks about the harlot, the prostitute. The great harlot symbolizes a profanation of the sanctities, the holy things of the Word and the church, and an adulteration of their goodness and truth. And many waters symbolize the Word's truths adulterated. Okay, so we've got that image of this harlot, this adulterated desire, and sitting on the waters, all the truths that have been adulterated too. To use the Word's truths to gain dominion over the sanctities of the church and heaven is to adulterate them. Right? So to take the truths of the Word and to use them for your own gain. To use the truths of the church for power, for control, to put me first, to lift myself up above other people. That is adulterating them, adulterating the truths. And to use them to claim for oneself the Lord's divine providence is to profane them. And using the Lord's truths to justify why you can take power for yourself. People know that they use the Word to defend their beliefs or defend their dogmas. So this is our state. We all find ourselves in this state where we use what is of the Lord's, use the holy things of the Word, holy things of the church to try and gain power and control, to put me first above another person. And part of that is then also that assuming power that is not yours, right? Claiming the Lord's power for myself when I think I know better, when I think I know what is right? When I'm convinced that I have the true path. Are we? Do we? The Lord's truth is infinite. The knowledge that there is to gain is infinite. So how can we assume that we have all the answers? And we overstep the boundary in a very big way when we judge another person's spiritual journey and think that we know what is needed in order for them to correct their ways. Right? We overstep the mark in assuming that we have the power to make these kinds of decisions and share what we think they need to know. So we have the harlot, we have the kings, and we have the people who were drunk. The kings in the story represent, in a positive sense, would represent all the true ideas that come out of love. But here in this story, we're talking about the opposite. We're talking about all the falsities that come out of a selfishness. So here the kings that rule our lives are the false ideas that come out of a selfishness. I want to read to you from Apocalypse Revealed 1:34. To commit sexual immorality means symbolically to adulterate and falsify the word. To commit sexual immorality has this symbolic meaning because every particular of the word contains a marriage of good and truth. And this marriage is broken when goodness is divorced and estranged from truth. That marriage in us is broken when we use the truth for our own benefit. Right? Truth is supposed to come from what is good and loving, or married to what is good and loving. When it is married to selfishness, it is no longer a truth. It becomes a falsity. And so wherever we have used a true idea to gain something over another person, it now becomes a falsity. It is no longer true. because it comes from a place of self rather than from a place of love, which is the Lord. And the third image there was the drunkenness of the people. We read from Secrets of Heaven, number 1072. Those people are called drunk who do not believe anything except that of which they have a mental grasp, and who for that reason probe into the mysteries of faith. Okay, so the mental grasp. But it goes on to say, right, our thought is altogether earthly and bodily and material because it is born of things that are earthly, bodily, and material, which cling to it all the time, and which the ideas comprising our thoughts are based on and encompassed by. And consequently, to think and reason about divine matters from such things is to run into errors and perversities. So what is it to think from earthly and material and bodily things? To think from earthly and bodily and material things is to think from our proprium, is to think from what is our own, right? That self-centered nature of ours. When we are thinking selfishly, when we are confined by time and space, then we are thinking from our own perception of life and not the Lord's guiding. How we see things is what we take as reality. And we take that then into the things of faith, and we make all sorts of errors. And so we have here the image of the harlot, right, adulterating the Lord's words. Supporting that are the kings, all the false ideas that we have drawn from the Lord's word, and below that, the things that we draw from this world that all support why it is okay for us to control, to expect things, to dominate, to put me first, to push others down, to lift me up. Those things all go together. And so what is being described here in these two verses is a spiritual state within each one of us. This describes a spiritual state within each one of us. The harlot, the fornicating kings, and the drunk people. But the good news is, and there is good news, the good news is that as the new church, we have an immense amount of knowledge and teaching that is there for us to use to help ourselves move out of that need for control and power and putting me first. It is all available to us if we choose to follow in that way. There is a teaching that allows us to go deeper, allow us to go further into the mysteries of faith to help us discover what is going on in me. Why am I doing these things? And we always have the freedom to choose to not do something, choose to change our ways. And so our task, first and foremost, is not to shy away from these disturbing images. These disturbing images in the Lord's Word are there to teach us about ourselves, not about anybody else, not about another faith, not about anybody else, but ourselves. Because the Lord is describing what is, and our work is to discover how it is true within myself. And so our task, first and foremost, don't shy away from these disturbing images. And perhaps they even create within you a physical reaction. Good. Hold on to that. It is precious. That reaction is useful. Because now the next step is then to go inwards into ourselves, to look at ourselves and discover where am I being the harlot? Where am I exerting control of other people and using the truths of the church to help reinforce that box? Where am I doing it? And when we discover it within ourselves, to be able to have that same physical reaction of disgust with ourselves, that is valuable. We should feel disgust at ourselves, just as we feel disgust when we see other things that are hurtful and damaging outside of ourselves. That's the first place that we need to get to in order for healing, in order to move forward. So the proprium is going to try and resist. Our selfishness is going to fight back. Our selfishness is going to say, no, this story doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to me. This applies to other people. Right? That's our proprium. Right? So be sure in the knowledge that this applies to you. Don't let your proprium try and convince you otherwise. So our task is to start investigating. Where is this in me? Where is this need? Where can I see this need to control someone? Where is this need for me to put my own desires first, my own choice first, where things need to work out my way? Can you see that in yourself? Can you look for other places where you're using the truths of the Lord's word to strengthen that desire for control over somebody else, rather than using the truths of the word to judge our own life? So think about your marriage, your friendships, where you work, your children. Right? In every aspect of our life, there is opportunity for us to reflect on this. But I want to end off on a more positive note. Because when we work with the Lord, the promise is that we can leave this behind. That image of a new heaven awaits for each one of us if we're willing to work with the Lord, willing to dive deep within ourselves. And so let's imagine what it's like if we left behind that control, left behind that needing for power, the need to put me first. What would life be like? We would lose interest in gossip, lose interest in listening to it, losing interest in spreading it, because we're not interested in putting others down. We're only interested in lifting other people up. We would lose interest in judging and condemning other people. Right? That's about pushing people down, judging others as less than ourselves so that we can feel better about ourselves. Leaving that behind. And you're only left within lifting people up. How can I lift people up in my life? We live with integrity. Right? What is inside in our heart flows outwards. We no longer live in fear of anything. Control and power is about me trusting in myself that I have the answer. When I live in integrity, then I'm putting my trust in the Lord. I'm saying I don't need to control. I don't need to have power. I don't need to put myself first. I find strength from the Lord inwardly in my life. And outwardly, I'm available to lift other people up, support and strengthen, and help others along the difficult path. And along with that comes an increase in thinking well of others. Being able to look deeper into a person, understand what they love, what they care for, support those good things in them, and forget about the judgment. Forget about looking at, speaking poorly of them, but trying to love and support them. Trying, in essence, to live the commandment that the Lord gave us, to love one another. Amen.